All right, today I want to pick up where we left off last time, but with a little bit of review first. And so, if you would, if you're logged in, once you're logged in, please follow along here. First of all, last time we created a project, and I created one for each one of my classes. And I mentioned to you that I store those on OneDrive so that if you can't keep up in class, or you forget the stuff that we did in class, or you deleted it, or anything, you can go to OneDrive and download what we did in class last time. So I'm just going to demonstrate that real quick. So if you don't have your sample project available, you could follow along here. If you do have it, you don't need to. It's just a demo. Put it in the recording so that Alan can hear it the next time he watches recordings. Maybe there'll be some secret answers in there. Alan did mention he was listening to my recordings and found answers to his worksheet questions. So there's some value to my recordings. So I'm going to go to Firefox real quick. And remember, the quickest way to OneDrive is probably simply to go to My Page and then click on OneDrive and sign in. Mine seems to be remembering where I signed in before, so there's my OneDrive account. That's the address that you need, mstcvgall. I make it all lowercase. I think somebody sent me an email the other day saying that they put it in uppercase and it seemed to work. And remember, the password is student. If you then sign in, go to Programming Logic Beginning. Unit 2 is the unit we're in. All the stuff I do is categorized into these things. So we're in Unit 2, and here's the sample 10. That would be yours. Right-click, download it, uncompress it. Because it's a compressed file, so you'll need to unzip it, and then you'll have exactly what I had in class last time. And every single day when I'm done, I drag the latest version up there, so even if you're at home, you can download what I did in class. Okay, so a little brief commercial in there, so I had paused the recording. I have deleted my sample 10 just to show you how I would download this if I were you. Okay. Right click on this, download it. And it'll ask me, because I have Firefox set up to ask me where I want to put it. I'm just going to put it right on my desktop because that's where I need it. Okay. And in my case, because I have this WinRAR program installed, I get this icon. You will get an icon that looks like a folder with a zipper on it. If you double click it, you can look inside it. You can even open the files that are inside it and look around, but you won't be able to change anything. So you have to remember when you get this download with the zipper on it to right click and extract. Then you'll get a folder that probably has the Visual Studio icon in it. At that point, you can delete the zipped file because this is the expanded version of that. You don't need both. And there's my 10 file. And let's go ahead and open that up. And if you have yours, go ahead and open yours. Remember, to open it, you simply double click the folder and then double click the SLN file. Hopefully your extensions are showing. While I'm at it, I did get an email from Kyle this weekend saying, I'm confused, DreamSpark doesn't have anything on it. There are 2 DreamSparks now. As of Friday, Catherine has registered you all for VMware. Your networking instructor should be telling you pretty soon how to use that, how to create a VMware machine. That way those of you with Macs can download that to your Mac, create a Windows machine so that you can do your programming logic assignments at home. We'll leave that, or for that matter, if you install VMware, you could make a copy if you've got a big enough drive of the virtual machine that you have here and take it home. And just use the exact same virtual machine. You won't have, the 2 machines are not linked, they're 2 different Windows machines, but you will be able to use that at home. So if you click the link in Catherine's email for VMware, that'll take you to a different DreamSpark account, and you won't see any of my stuff. If you want to see my stuff now, you have to make sure you either click the link in my email, and it doesn't have my name on it, so it's hard to tell, or better yet, just go to my website, Programming Logic, click DreamSpark from there. All right. Thank you for Kyle for pointing that out. Robin?
If we wanted the like let's say someone like copied their virtual machine from this one to like their external hard drive. If they have a 3.0 hard drive, would they be able to just use that same exact one? So
Absolutely. Well, yeah, yes, you can use the same one. So what Robin is suggesting is you move your virtual machine from your desktop, your Mac, to your external drive. Once it's on your external drive, you can run it from there, and hopefully it'll be fast enough for you. And then you can take the external drive home and run it from there, off the external drive, and have the exact same machine in both places. Steve's kind of shaking his head going, that may or may not work depending on the drive. Also remember, I'll put it in the recording, that if you're going to share a drive, actually, now that I think about it, that might not work because the drive, the virtual machine itself is one file. It's 20, 30 gigabytes.
It's connected.
And there's no way for you to run that on a Windows machine and a Mac machine, because the advanced file system for Mac is different than the advanced file system for Windows, and the two, you can't get them on one drive, and you can't use them back and forth.
It's too large for FAT32.
It's too large for FAT32.
Right, okay.
There are ways to create split virtual machines, but that's a whole different issue. I'm going to leave that to your networking instructor. So, good idea. In practice, it won't work, but
the maximum for FAT32 is 4 gigabytes, right?
Yes. Yeah. And this is a 20 some odd plus more gigabyte file, so it might be hard for you to transfer that file home. If you need some help, ask me. But for right now, I would say wait until your networking instructor gets you ready for the virtual machines. Unless you're running a Mac, just was that you that's running a Mac at home, you should be able to transfer the virtual machine because we'll format your external drive for the Mac. So if you need some help, first you got to get VMware installed and configured and do all that kind of stuff. The networking class is going to teach you that.
I think if you hosted your own virtual machine, if you hosted your own virtual machine on your own server at home, then you could probably do it.
A whole different problem if you have a server at home. All right, let's get back to the task at hand here. Here's my sample folder. All right, inside the sample folder is the SLN file. I'm going to double click that to launch my project. While that's launching, I'm going to go back to this and remind you of the structure because it's been 3-4 days, so I want to make sure everything's clear here. When we had the structure of a Visual Studio Solution folder, there's an outside folder. Inside there, we just saw the SLN file. You double click that to launch your project. That SLN file is a pointer to a project file that's inside the project folder. Okay, so if I come here, there's my project folder. Project folder and the solution folder typically have the same name, so it could get a little confusing, right? Because there's a sample folder, and inside the sample folder there's another sample folder. Remember, never ever rename anything in here using Windows. That causes trouble. Inside the project folder there's a project file. The solution file points to that. When you double click this, it automatically launches this project. That project is linked to multiple form files. And then inside there's a bin folder, debug folder, and our executable. If we want to, we can have more. So remember again, more projects. Remember again, the only place you should be renaming files is all the way out here. If you get that warning, this just says it's not a trustworthy source because it's coming off my desktop, just click it away. I haven't found a good way to get rid of it yet. Even making it a trusted folder doesn't seem to help any. So this folder I can rename, the outside-most solution folder. So I can rename this. You don't have to, but you may. And it doesn't cause any trouble. Oh, except it's running, so that's not going to work. But inside, when you open this up, none of this stuff should ever be renamed using Windows. You can rename it using Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is running. Let's maximize that, get myself a little bit of space here. And now where's my project? Right, where's my form? My form is here. It's just hiding right now. So I just need to find it in the Solution Explorer and double click it. Please, there we go. I want to double click it, there's my form, all the changes that I made to it, and recognize that this project that I'm working on came off of OneDrive. It wasn't on my desktop 2 minutes ago. It came off of OneDrive. I downloaded it from OneDrive, extracted it, opened it. It's an exact duplicate of what I was working on Friday. So when you get in there, don't be too surprised if you don't see anything when you first open the project up. Just double click the form and go from there. Last time we started, I'm just flying through all these notes here because we did all that already. Manage, remember the push pins on the toolbox. We'll see that again today. You can move your windows around. Changing form names, let's review that. When you create a form, its initial name here will be form1.cs. To rename it, you click here and change the name here. When you change the name here, it also changes the name of the form itself. Now, what did I do? I paused the recording because this thing was spinning on that required operation. I'm not sure what was causing that. Maybe some updates, but now it's gone. So we renamed the form here. When you rename the form and then click on the form itself, the form name also changes. We put a prefix on it, FRM sample. All of our object names are going to get prefixes. Then on OneDrive, I'm not going to go there. Well, I probably still have it available. Yep. Go back one level to programming logic. There are a bunch of steps here to complete for every new form. This is a review. We initialized the form, gave it a good name, changed its title. We did that. Select the form, change its text to whatever you want that to be. It should be something appropriate for the form. Then my list of steps says change the start position, so we did that. Start position is right above the text to center screen so that the project, whenever it runs, always runs in the center of the screen. And then change the form icon. We did that. Here's the icon. We went browsing for icons. Now, last Friday, I promised you that I would put some icons out on OneDrive. I've put a few out there, but I started looking at my icons, and they're pretty lame. All right. Some older 16-bit, 16-color icons, pretty lame looking. I wouldn't want to use them. If I were going to find icons, I would use the link on my site. Down at the very bottom, there is an icon archives site. This is a site that you can go to with lots and lots of icons. You can search for just about anything you're looking for. Just put something in the search in here, and it'll find a bunch of icons for you. Okay, oops. Just gotta be patient. Let's go back. Can't go back. There we go. And if I wanted the school bus, there's the ICO, and I can click on that and download it, and it will give me an icon that looks like that school bus. These look a whole lot better than the ones I have. So when you're looking, I've put maybe 30, 40 of them up on OneDrive. But if you're looking for something a little cooler that matches your program, try searching here and download your own and then use that in the program. Remember, in order for the form icon and for the project icon, you must use an ICO file. For everything else, images and little icons that you put in the middle of your form, you can use PNGs or JPEGs. All right, so we went looking for this one. This one we downloaded from OneDrive and installed it. Then the last step is to change your project icon. To change your project icon, you have to double click on properties up here and then change this by hitting the dots and finding, I recommend the same icon. It is possible in Visual Studio to have different icons for every single form in your project. And you're going to have 2 forms in your project before too long. One form will be a welcome screen, and then you'll have the actual program itself. I would recommend that the program icon and the project icon match, but they don't have to. But I do require that you change them. Questions? Okay, those steps are on OneDrive, so you can look at them anytime, or you can actually download them and print them, if heaven forbid, or print them and stick them on your monitor so you don't forget, and go on from there. All right, then we started going through the notes and talking about how can we customize forms even more. We changed the back color. Remember, when you change the back color of the form, it also changes the background color of every object on that form. We'll see that effect a little bit later. So here's a label that we added to the form. It also has this lime green background color. Talked about good background colors versus bad background colors. Just good combinations that are easy to read. This weekend I got an email submittal from one of my second-year students with a web page that had a very dark background and then a very dark red text on top of that, and it was very hard to read. And I told him so and took a half a point because I couldn't read the text. It was so close in color. So I recommend a light background color and then a darker color for your text. Could always leave it. Nah, you can't in this first unit because I require you to change it just to prove that you can. In the future, if I don't require a color change, you could leave the Microsoft standard boring light gray with black text that is always very readable. So we changed the form names, talked about naming, and here we talked about the text of the form. That's what goes across the top. Talked about the back color. That's what we just talked about. The icon we've already changed. Start position we've already changed. What we didn't get to on Friday, though the other class did, is the font. A form has a font. So if you scroll through here, here's the font property. And in the font property, you can hit the dots and the standard font dialog box will come up and you can pick a different font. So just pick something there, maybe pick something that's a little more exciting than the boring one here. Let's go with Magneto. Some of these you can make bold and italic if you want to. You can definitely make them bigger and click on OK. Notice it doesn't change this title bar because that's a Windows property, not a form property, but it did change my label to give it a different font. It also made the label bigger, and a side effect is it made the form bigger because now it expects all the labels on the form will be bigger, so you probably want a little bit of room. Again, this is a side effect. Whenever you change the font of a form, it changes the font of every text object on that form, all the labels, all the text boxes. When the users type in those text boxes, it'll be in this Magneto font or whatever font you chose. I wanted to show it to you, introduce you to fonts, but I almost never change the form font because when you do, it changes everything. In the future, very near future, I will show you how to change the font of just that one label to make it cool looking and everybody else is still the standard font. I rarely change them all, though you can. Remember, for any property, you can reset it to its original value by right-clicking and resetting it. Now, before I do that, I also want to talk about the for color of the form. This is the color of the text on the form. If you drop that down, we get the same dialog box that we got before with the system colors, the web colors, and custom. So I'm going to choose a dark red here, and notice I changed the font color of my form, and the label changed. Every object on the form that has text will adopt this color. So if you want all of the objects on your form to have this color, then change it on the form because it'll change them all. If you want to change one or two, you select the one and change just that one. Let's reset both of these back to their normal ones. So I'm going to reset this color. It's not going to let me. Why not? How about the font? Why not? Oh, because I have the label selected. So now I select the form, there we go, and I should be able to reset it. That's where I set it, so that's where I can reset it, and now everything goes back to the way it was. I want to introduce you to the font and the for color there, but it's not something I normally do to the form because it changes everything and it has these drastic side effects. For color, there's also a background image that we can add to a form. It's a little different than the back color, but it's in the same neighborhood here. It's a background image. Now, just as a reminder, I have downloaded the images from my OneDrive, and I put it in this folder called Unit 2 Stuff. And you should have downloaded that because that's where we got this icon. But there's a bunch of other stuff in there that we're going to use now. So if you don't have that folder, you might want to quick run out to OneDrive and download the images folder from OneDrive. First, check your desktop because you probably downloaded it last time and it's sitting there someplace. Back on the form, I now want to add a background image to this. Now this is important. There are two ways to add images to your projects. You can make them a project resource file. If you make them a project resource file, you'll be a little bit more efficient, because what Visual Studio will do is make one copy of this image and put it in your resources folder. And then every time you want to use that resource, that image, you can use it over and over and over again, but there's really only one copy of it. It's pretty efficient if you've got 30 forms and they all want it, and you want them all to use the same image. But we're only going to have one or two. And the problem with this is when you copy your forms, the images don't go with them. In the future, I'm going to have you copy your welcome screen. For the purposes of this class, you should always use a local resource. When you use a local resource, Visual Studio will take a copy of that image and put it in this form. And if you want to put it in other forms, which probably won't, you'll have to put it in there again. For the purposes of this class, it'll save you a lot of grief to use a local resource. Then you choose import, and once again go out and find your file. My computer is already taking me to my folder on my desktop. If you're not there, then go to the desktop and find your folder. And here's my small sunset. That's what I want to use. Double click it. There it is. And click on OK. And notice what it does with my small sunset. It tiles it, repeats it over and over and over again to fill the form. What's nice is if I make it bigger, it continues to repeat it. This is magic stuff, right? If I run it and make it full screen, it repeats it over and over and over again, but there's really only one copy of that image in there. The reason it's repeating it is because under the background image property is the background image layout property, and by default, the layout is tile. If you wish, you can change that and say no layout, and it'll park the picture in the upper left. I could say center, and it'll park it in the center. I can stretch it, and when I stretch it, this is what I call silly putty mode. Okay? It distorts the shape of the image. Not real good unless you get it just right. My favorite is zoom. It makes the picture as big as it can be to fill your form without distorting it. All right, so as I make my form bigger, my picture gets bigger, but it doesn't distort. Now that looks halfway decent, but actually I have another sunset picture in there that's full size that, notice as I enlarge this, the sunset picture starts to pixelate and it looks a little fuzzy. It's because it's a small picture, I'm making it bigger. There's another one out there, just a normal sunset. If you like this, you can bring it in. One thing to recognize here is notice the label is green. The background color is green. Because I changed the background color of the form, my label now has a background color of green, and that looks okay, I guess, but what I'm going to do now is select that label, so do the same thing. The label only has one handle, I'll explain why in a little bit, but it is selected, it does have the handle, and I'm now going to go to the background color of the form and say green is not good, I want to change it. I'm overriding it. When I change the background color of the form, every object on the form gets that color, but for every object, you can override it. I'm going to go to Web, and at the top of the web list is a transparent background, meaning I don't have one. Whatever's behind me shows through. Click on that, and now I can see the sunset. So that's another very common technique, particularly with labels, is to make them transparent instead of giving them a background color. They can see through. One thing to be careful of here is now when I let go, if you put that in the wrong spot, you may not be able to see it. So maybe the background color of transparent isn't so great if I want that label to be on top of one of the palm trees. I can also change the text color now, the font color of this, make it white so that it shines through. All right, so that's one way to do a background picture, is to bring it in. And remember, when you bring in, I'm going to select my form again now. When you bring it in, you set the image, and if necessary, also change the background layout. I'm going to change my layout back to tile. And I'm going to show you the primary reason for these tile layouts is there are backgrounds that are called textures. So I'm going back to import. I'm going to get a new picture. And I have 1, 2, 3 textures here. Okay. Any image you can tile. So if I put this coffee cup in there, it'll tile it and I'll have 20 copies of the coffee cup. But if you use one of these pictures, I'm going to use the wicker to start with. It is specifically designed, whoever drew this, people with skills beyond mine, to tile without showing any edges. Notice how it all blends together. It's called a texture. If you do a search on the web and you look for JPEG texture, don't just look for texture because you'll get every cloth company in America and all the different textures they have. But if you look for JPEG or texture picture, you'll find lots and lots and lots of these. Again, the problem with this one is if my label's in the wrong spot, I can't read it. And so this texture is just a little too busy for me, though if I made my label bigger, change this font color, I can probably use it. But I'm not really in love with that. So once again, I'm going to click on the form. Remember, whenever you're changing properties, you have to select the right object. Click on the form, and I'm going to change the background image to the marble one. And now my label shows up. And this one doesn't repeat quite as good because I can see the pattern, but it's not bad. So that's another thing you can do. And finally, I'm going to do that just one more time and go to the clouds because that's my favorite, at least today. And again, as I mentioned, when you run this, if you maximize the running window, and here it is launched in the middle of the screen because I told it to. If I maximize that window, it just keeps repeating them over and over and over again to fill the screen. If you have a 24-inch monitor, 27-inch monitor, it'll keep repeating that pattern over and over and over again. It's called a texture. There are many, many others on the web. Most of them are free. It's just a matter of finding one that you like. Questions about background image? Yes, Steve?
The background image that we choose, every time we choose one, it replaces what's there?
Correct.
Thank you.
There's only one background image to a form. You can center it, you can park it in the left. You can't move it around much, right? But you can. Let me bring in one more. You don't have to follow on this one. I'm going to bring in the bigger sunset, which is this one. And notice it's significantly bigger. And when I put that in, it's now cropped it. Because it's so big, it doesn't fit in here. Maybe in this case, I want to use zoom to make it fit as nicely as possible. And then, okay, there, it's perfect. But now when I run this, notice how much brighter and sharper it is than the one we were using before, because I used a small version of it. Here's the big version. If I maximize it, it doesn't quite fill the edges. Maybe I want to put a reddish orange in here in case the user maximizes it. I definitely don't want this tiled. But notice even enlarged, it still looks very sharp. I can see the masts on the sailboats and so on. So there's all kinds of techniques here that you can work on. What I will often do if I find a picture like this that I really like is set my form size so that it fits in there just perfectly, and then hope the user doesn't click maximize because it shows the green on the outside. But if the user does maximize, I can set a color, an orange color, a brown color, something around the outside, or just black to fill the rest of it. But I definitely don't want to stretch that. But once again, notice my label is obscured. Okay, I'm going to go back to clouds here. By the way, when you're running, go ahead and run. You get a lot of extra windows down here. I might have to redo my favorite or my settings to get rid of these, but whenever these show up, just close them. And there's a bunch of them, so you might have to close 3 or 4 times. These are all supposedly important, but I never need them. And they only appear when you're running. Now that you've closed them, they generally won't come back. You might have to do it at home. But once you're running, if you see those windows and they're bothering you, just close them. When you need them, if we need them, we can always bring them back. Now remember, I'm running. So right now, if I want to change this back to clouds, where's my properties window? I was pleasantly surprised this weekend I didn't get that email. I can't see my properties windows. What did I do wrong? Are you running? And it comes back. So I'm going back to clouds. and tiling. So we talked about the font, talked about the four-color, talked about the background image. Questions about forms? I don't think there's any more form properties to talk about. So now we're going to move on and talk about adding controls to our form. That's from the toolbox. So now I'm going to put some things on this form that I can manipulate. I'm also going to shrink my form down a little bit, about that size. And again, your screen's much bigger than mine. Just make sure you've got a little bit of room. And I'm now going to open and pin the toolbox. Make sure that your entire form shows up over here when the toolbox is expanded. So I still have a little more room, could even do that. You already have a label on the form. So what I would like you to do first is delete that. To delete any object except the form itself. The form cannot be deleted. It's in a file. If you want to delete the form, you have to delete the file. That's much later. To delete any object that's on a form, simply select it and then press the delete key, not the backspace key. I'm sorry, the delete key with the little arrow on it on your keyboard, because the other one doesn't work. The one above the backslash key doesn't work here. You need to press the delete key to get rid of the objects. You can also undo, Control Z, undo again, right click and delete it from there if you're having trouble. This is a Mac issue, you get a different keyboard. Right? So you have to make sure you're using the delete key that's right underneath the FN key on the Mac, and that one will delete. Selecting in the delete key over there, and that deletes. The delete key with the arrow to the right is like the delete key on your Windows machine. The delete key without the arrow is like the backspace key on your Windows machine. They're just labeled differently.
And I didn't even know there were two delete keys on that keyboard.
Yeah, that's why he brings in his own keyboard. You don't have to worry about it. All right. So we can delete objects, but how do we add new ones? There's 4 different ways to add objects. Each one of them has its own advantages. So the first way, we're going to put a bunch of labels on the form. The first way is to double-click. When you double-click the object over here, it parks it someplace on your form, and I'm going to say that's random. If there's logic to it, I haven't quite figured it out yet. But once it's on your form, now you can move it. If you touch it, you get a 4-headed arrow, and you can move that label around. Notice this label has automatically adopted the background color of the form. That's okay. We'll live with it for now. So that's one way. Another way, let's do another label, is to click on the label here, and then come onto your form and notice your cursor has changed shape. It's got an A attached to a plus sign, and park it where you want it and click, and it'll put a label there. Or you can come over here, grab the label, and simply drag it. Don't worry about the blue lines that are flashing. We'll talk about them in a minute, and put it where you want it. I tend to double click and then move it where I want it. Though click and drag, all of these work pretty good. Pick whatever works for you. There's no way for me to tell. I think is there a worksheet question that says what are the different ways to add things onto your form? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Whatever works for you, put it on the form. There's a 4th way, but we can't use a label for it. I'll explain why a little bit later. So let's use a button. So click on the button once to select it. Come on to the form. And now I want you to not just click. Remember, we clicked. Let me show you what happens. Don't do this. If you click, it gives you a default size button. I deleted it. If you drag, you can make the button as big as you want. So if you want to add a picture to your form and you want it to be a certain size, you can size it ahead of time. That's nice, but most of the time my size isn't right and I end up resizing it later, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So most of the time I either double click or click and drag, because that's kind of what's natural to me. Drag it from the toolbox onto the form. Any one of them work. I can't tell which one you used. Doesn't matter as long as you get them on the form. So those are the 4 ways. Now we can do things with them. We already learned how to delete. Click on them. Remember, now we've got lots of labels, right? When you click it, it gets one handle. And then press the delete key with the little arrow on the Mac keyboard to get rid of it. Delete key on your Windows keyboard. So we know how to delete them. We can move them. We saw how to do that. Just point to the middle till you get the four-headed arrow. The shape of the arrow makes a difference. If I put my button back in here again and I want to move this, I can't be on the edges of it. Can't be on the handles. If I want to move it, I have to have a four-headed arrow. So moving is not too hard. We can resize them. Okay, let's put the button back again. I'm going to double-click the button. I'm going to move it. And now I can resize it by using the handles. If you use the corners, you can drag in two directions at once, sideways and up and down. If you grab the middle, I can only go sideways, I can't go up and down. Grab the top, I can only go up and down, I can't go sideways. So all those handles are there. Which one you use is up to you. I tend to go the right-hand side, grab a corner, and go. You can, as we saw, resize the form. Same way, if you use the corners, you can drag in two directions, up and down, left and right. If you use this, you can only go up and down. You can't go left and right. If you put a button on your form, go ahead and delete it. Questions about sizing, moving? Not too tough. Okay. By the way, the undo button, what's the shortcut key for undo? Control Z. It's worn out on the keyboard in my office. Okay. You can undo using the button up here, but I just do Control Z, and by the way, on the Mac, Command Z also works. Unless you're in the Mac. If you're actually using the Mac, not a virtual machine, Control Z doesn't work. You have to do Command Z. Okay, but we're using a Windows virtual machine, so Control Z works, so does Command Z. And it works multiple levels. So if when I was changing my background, I changed it 6 different times. I could have just done undo, 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 undo. Ultimately, it would have come back. Very powerful undo feature. Another very valuable skill is being able to select multiple controls at the same time. So here I have 3 labels. If I want to select all 3 labels and make them transparent, the easiest way to do that is select all 3, then change the background property to transparent. How do I select all 3? If you're at home, well, most of you are taking the Microsoft Office class. They're teaching you file management in there too. They teach you how to select multiple files at the same time. How do you do that? How do you select 2 different files if one's here and one's over there? Control, click it, right? But be careful. Right? This is not Microsoft Word or Windows. Right? In Visual Studio, you first click one of the objects that you want to select. Notice my form is selected right now. If I control click, and by the way, that doesn't work on this Mac, and it's in my notes. Because we're in a virtual machine, control click doesn't work because control means something to the Mac. It's control option click. That's annoying. But notice I now have 2 things selected, and this is very complicated. This is a very common mistake. I have 2 things selected. I have the label and my form selected. That's not good. Normally, when you're selecting objects, you don't want to include the form. If I make this transparent, the label transparent, all of a sudden your form is transparent. And boy, is that fun when you run it. Because you can't even see your form. Yes, that's possible to do. Right. What's even cooler is then you put an image in the middle of Snoopy or whatever, and all around Snoopy there's nothing, but somewhere there's this X floating around for you to click on. Right. It's kind of bizarre, so don't do that. It probably cause you grief. How do you unselect stuff? Click them again, but my form's selected. Press the escape key. And now nothing except the form is selected. If you want to select multiple objects, don't include the form. You have to click the first one, just a regular, straight old click. Now, I was asking you about Windows. In Windows, if you click one file and then shift-click one down here, it selects everything in between. Right, well, that's not going to happen here because there's no between. But you can use, and I highly encourage this when you're using the Mac, Shift to select multiple objects. So I'm shift-clicking my labels now. So just get in the habit here of shift-clicking to select multiple objects. You can use option control, but shift-click is better. Notice the 2 of them have black handles, one of them has a white handle. The white handle one is the master. We can go, we'll do this later, we can go to Format, Align the Bottom. The bottom of who? The bottom of the master. So if I do Align Bottom, it's going to line up with my label 3 there because it's the master. If you want a different one to be the master, just regular click it. It has to be selected. Notice now it's white. Now this one's white. That used to be really important. It's less important than it used to be. Okay. So now I have 3 labels selected by shift clicking. One of them is the master. If you want to shift the master, click a different one. I'm going to click on the form. In this case, that deselects all the stuff I had selected. Could have pressed escape. Another way to select multiple objects, watch up here and then you can try it. I'm going to put my cursor just outside or somewhere near label 3 and I'm going to drag a box. Anything I touch, I don't have to surround it. Anything I touch gets selected. Which one's the master? That again seems to be somewhat random, though I was close to label 3. What if I start out here? And I have to be careful when I do this. You can surround them. Okay? Notice label 3 is still the master. But you can change it. So that's a technique I use if the objects are close, there's nothing in between. But what if I change my mind? I can mix these 2 techniques and say shift-click label 2 and it deselects it. I didn't mention that. You select objects, multiple objects, by shift-clicking them. If you change your mind about one, shift-click it again, it removes it. You can mix and match the techniques. Drag to select a bunch of them and then shift-click one of them to remove it. Finally, you can press Control-A on your keyboard and it will select all objects except the form. That, by the way, a lot of these keys and these shortcuts and multiple selects work everywhere. Here it's a little different. Shift-click does something a little different. But Control-A in Microsoft Word, select everything. Excel, select everything. PowerPoint slide, Control-A, select everything on the form. Now that they're selected, I can do whatever I want to them. I can press the delete key and blow all 3 of them away. Or I can go to the background property. Some of these properties are disabled because you have multiple labels selected. There are some things you can't do, but I can change the background color of all of them to web transparent. And now they're all transparent. I can do them all at once. Very handy. Questions about selecting multiple objects. Make sure I didn't miss anything here. Option 1, shift click. And here's my note about if you're using a Mac, you have to control Option, which is painful. Option 2, drag. Option 3, Control-A. And there's the big important, don't shift click the first object. Because if you shift click the first one, that adds it to the form. That's probably not what you want. Click the first object if you're doing this clicking thing. Click the first object, then shift click the rest, and be careful not to accidentally hit the form, because if you hit the form, whatever changes you make will also be made to the form. If you do that and the form becomes transparent, Control-Z, try again. You get used to this very quickly. All right, let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about aligning controls.